Hey guys, Angie here to break down Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier for the undisputed lightweight title. As a Dustin fan, I'm kind of dreading this fight, but as a purist, I'm a little intrigued to see how these guys match up mentally and also from a technical standpoint. This is Dustin's third and final shot at the lightweight title, most likely. I think there's a lot of pressure, but he seems to be a little bit nonchalant about it, which is a little interesting. But before we get into the main event, let's have a look at the rest of the main card. Okay, first up we have Randy Brown versus Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Randy Brown is quite a great fighter all round. He's had a lot of success. He did lose to JDM a few fights ago, but since then he's looked really good. And before that, I think he was on a 4-fight win streak. He's got a significant height advantage, and he's got quite the reach advantage as well. He's a very solid or well-rounded fighter. On the other hand, Eli Dos Santos, he is 37. I think he got into UFC later in his career, if I'm correct. He's lost to a common opponent in Muslim Salikov, who Randy Brown just KO'd. But that was a little while ago for Eli. Eli is coming off a draw, and then before that, a split decision over Abu Nurmagomedov, I think Khabib's cousin, and a unanimous decision over Benoit Saint-Denis, which was a few years ago, because I think Benoit was fighting at welterweight then. So he hasn't been as active. He's older in his career. The odds, I think, are pretty correct on this one. So I've got Randy Brown winning, I would think maybe by a finish. I don't really know much more than that because I don't really know much about Eli, actually. Yeah, I'll just pick Randy Brown looking at the stats that I have. Next fight of the main card, we have Jailton Almeida, who's been, I guess, a hot prospect in some regards, versus Alexander Romanov. Jailton Almeida has been finishing his opponents up until the upper echelons. He's gone to unanimous decision with Derek Lewis, maybe in a fight that he should have arguably been able to finish. He submitted Jairzinho Rozenstruik before that, and he just lost to Curtis Blades not too long ago, actually, so he's having a quick turnaround. He showed a bit of lack of wanting to finish fights against the top opponents, but his grappling is world class. He has a slight height advantage in this fight, and he's still quite young for heavyweight. Alexander, on the other hand, he's been a solid fighter, but he hasn't been winning to the top 15 guys, whereas Almeida has won against the top 5 guys, I would argue. Well, Derek Lewis and Rozenstruik, they were in the top 5, but they're not right now. But Romanov is losing to the top 15 guys. So yeah, I would favor Almeida in this fight as well, just given that. Yeah, that's all I have to say on this one. Romanov has fought Alexander Volkov, but he got TKO'd. Marcin Tybura, he went to unanimous decisions. I think Almeida will be able to win this one. Maybe by decision, or although he did get KO'd the last fight, so maybe by decision. He might want to play it safe again. Well, he always plays it safe. Next fight, we have Kevin Holland, who's been very active, but he's gone back up to middleweight to fight Michael Oleksiejczuk. Kevin Holland, I thought, was looking really good at welterweight. He's just had a bit of bad luck in his last 2 fights. I thought that not that he didn't show up, but maybe he was struggling a bit with his gas tank. He had a tricky opponent in his last fight against MVP. And before that, Jack Della Maddalena, that was a close fight too, I thought, in my opinion. And then before that, he submitted Michael Chiesa, who was a top 15 welterweight, up against Oleksiejczuk, who has kind of been losing some and winning some, similar to Kevin Holland in that respect. Except Oleksiejczuk's wins haven't been against the same caliber of fighters. So he seems to lose to all the name-building fighters that he's been matched up with. Although he does have a win over Sam Alvey, but Sam Alvey, he's a very beatable opponent. Well, he was at the end of his UFC career anyway. Kevin Holland, on the other hand, he's very difficult to finish. He has a really good chin. I think at his best, he could have been a top 5 welterweight and at worst top 15, but that doesn't matter anymore because he's back at middleweight. Maybe it was just too much of a weight cut for him. He fights often, but he doesn't always win because he kind of sacrifices maybe rest time and game planning time for his opponents to perform at his best. He beats most people in the world though, and he's very talented and tricky. Yeah, so I'm favouring Kevin in this one. The odds are pretty right, I think. All right, Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa for the co-main event. So this is kind of a bittersweet fight for me just because I'm a massive Sean Strickland fan. Arguably, in hindsight, I think he could have won that fight or maybe should have won that fight. or at least got an immediate rematch with Dricus du Plessis. It does feel like the UFC want to discard him now, which is really strange because he's such a big star, even though he's a bit, inappropriate in some people's views, but he's a fighter for God's sake. So I haven't rewatched that fight back because I'm kind of afraid I'll see that he won and then I'll just feel angry about it. But whatever, Dricus, he deserved to win in whatever way he did. He still fought a great fight. It was a close fight, but I'm a little bit disappointed. It seems they just want to get rid of Sean, not give him a really good fight, not give him a title fight, not give him even someone like Whittaker. I think would have been a more respectable opponent, more interesting matchup. This fight is interesting, but it does seem like a bit of a waste. They could have even made a rematch of Izzy, non-title fight. But, the UFC have their plans. And Paulo Costa, on the other hand, he's been displaying a bit more professionalism lately. He's looked really good. He's shown up like he actually wants to win fights, which has been a really good turn for him. Even though he lost his last fight against Whittaker, he landed some really good shots on him. He lost all his fights by unanimous decision, so he's going to be tough to finish. His last few fights, he won against Luke Rockhold. I mean, Luke Rockhold, I feel like could have beaten him. But I feel like Paulo Costa, he's got his head straight now, I think, and that could be dangerous for Sean in whatever way that turns out to be. Even though Sean's so great technically and he's so sound and militant and focused in his fighting, something tells me that this fight could be a bit more competitive than what people might expect. Sean does have the reach advantage, the leg reach and arm reach. They're both the same age. I think most times out of 10, I think Sean wins this fight. Perhaps 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10, but don't be surprised if Costa does something weird or Sean turns up a bit angry that he lost the belt the way he did and he hasn't got the rematch and he might do something rash, because we've seen Sean, when he does things rash, he does leave himself open, like the way he fought Pereira wasn't smart. But when he is the best version of Sean, he's very difficult. So I'm picking Sean to win this one by decision. I'm interested to see how he fights actually 3 rounds, because he's been fighting a lot of 5-round fights recently. So it'll be interesting to see what he looks like. And likewise for Paulo Costa. But I've got Sean Strickland by unanimous decision. And I hope that he gets that rematch with Dricus or Izzy next. But yeah, I would have liked to see him fight Whittaker, actually. Okay, the main event, Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier for the lightweight title. So on Dustin's side, he's already had 2 shots of this. I've said it before, but I think each time you try and get the title, it gets a bit harder. It's going to be a lot of pressure to deal with. If anyone can deal with that pressure, I think Dustin can, because I think he's a bit, like I said, nonchalant about everything. And if he just goes in there to have fun and not be reckless, but also just be in the moment, I think the pressure won't get to him like it did to Colby against Leon Edwards. On the other hand, Dustin is 35. He's shown that he has wanted to retire. So he's got one foot out the door, but that could also be a benefit or a hindrance. It was a hindrance in his last title fight against Oliveira, because he said that he had planned to retire if he won in a Teddy Atlas interview. And Teddy said, well, that means you'd already kind of resigned to defeat, something along those lines. But I think Dustin has the right mentality with thinking that this fight could be my last one or not. So I think mentally Dustin could be in a good place in this fight. But he's up against the pound-for-pound number 1 in the world. So he's up against Islam, who's the best fighter in the world, according to the pound-for-pound rankings. He's only had 1 loss to Adriano Martins, and that was 13 fights ago, so ages ago. On an interesting note, that fighter was a southpaw, or is a southpaw, and he won via a right hook. And that sounds like something that Dustin might do stylistically, but that was 13 fights ago. But it's interesting that he did get KO'd by another southpaw, and I'm sure Dustin has taken an incentive from that. As ridiculous as it may be that it was that long ago, it shows that there was a weakness there, or perhaps a potential opening for something like that to happen. Another thing that people don't really seem to know about Islam is that he was a world champion before Khabib in Sambo, I think. And people always act like he's Khabib's protege, and I think it's actually not quite right. I think Islam was doing maybe even a bit more than Khabib, but just not in the MMA world, not in the UFC world. So it does kind of annoy me a little bit that people just think he's riding off Khabib's back, which isn't exactly correct. Islam's shown extreme improvements in his striking And he is a very good fighter. This is going to be a very, very tough fight for Dustin to win. And as much as I love Dustin, I'm not really counting on him winning at all. I'm giving him a puncher's chance. So I'm probably giving him, I reckon he'll win this fight maybe 2 out of 10 times, 1 out of 10 times. So about 10 to 20%. Maybe not 20%, maybe 10 to 15%. If he does win, it's definitely going to be by finish for Dustin. There's no way that he beats Islam to a decision. It's very unlikely. Although anything can happen in a fight. So Islam, he's 32, Dustin 35. The odds there, Makhachev is a minus 575, Dustin a plus 425 underdog. That's somewhat, I guess, reflective of how I feel about the fight. Even though it seems a little bit drastic, I thought there may be actually a bit more believers in Dustin. Because Dustin is he's a loved guy and people do believe in him. But I'm just telling you now, don't get your hopes up. Be pleasantly surprised if he wins. But it's Islam Makhachev. And Dustin didn't really get into this title shot on merit. As much as I love him and we love him, he got into this fight again because of Islam's manager. He knows how to look after Islam and give him an easy fight. Well, a favourable fight, let's say. So yeah, I'm not getting my hopes up, but it's not impossible. So Islam is coming off the KO of Alexander Volkanovski, even though that was on short notice. What can you do? But he did win against Volkanovski the fight before, I thought, quite handedly. I scored that fight 3-2 for Islam. And he subbed Charles Oliveira. And yeah, he's on a 13-fight win streak. So there's not a lot of bad things to say about Islam from a technical standpoint. I would have liked to see him fight more top contenders in the lightweight division, like even someone like Gaethje, or even someone like, even the rematch of Arman again would have been maybe a bit more interesting from a technical standpoint. But there is something that Dustin's bringing that is compelling that I can't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it's just because I'm a fan and Dustin does seem to have this magic about him at times, but you can't rely on magic to win fights. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of curious to see what Dustin can do with this opportunity, but at the same time, not getting my hopes up. I'm looking forward to the fight. I respect both guys. I think, there's a lot of friction. There's a lot of people that love or hate Islam. It's a bit much, but I think he's a really great guy. He's doing the best he can. I think the management side of fighters can sometimes make them seem like they're not willing to fight certain fighters or take on certain opponents, but that's not their fault. That's the managers. But then I'm not defending him, but I just would have liked to see Islam fight. I want to see him fight someone that I think is really going to challenge him, even if it was someone like Oliveira again. I feel like that may have been more of a threat. And also, I just don't want to be disappointed again when Dustin loses, but respect to Dustin for taking this fight. It's not easy. It's not easy fighting for the belt. It's not easy doing something a third time after failing when it's something so big and it takes so long to climb back. And if Dustin is able to get this done, it will be the biggest moment in UFC history. One of the biggest ones. So I'm excited. I'm not getting my hopes up. May the best man win. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for coming by. Thanks for the support and take care. Enjoy the fights and see you around the traps. Bye.